Okay, so this is what my pan generally looks like when I'm starting fiber. What you see in there is like hot water, as hot as I can get it from my tap, which mine is a little bit hotter than the average tap. I keep it turned up because it makes it a little bit easier when you're working on like pan after pan after pan to be able to start with really hot water. And then there is a splash of synthropol and about 2 tablespoons of citric acid in here already. So that is how pretty much every pan I am making starts off, for fiber anyway, unless for some specific reason I am doing like a solid color. But generally speaking, if I'm working on fiber, that is not something that I do. So you want to start with a splash of synthropol and about 2 tablespoons of citric acid. Okay, so I need to do some of this like gray tweed, but I went ahead and put a merino non-superwash in here as well, just so you can kind of see the process. So I bought these metal chopsticks on Amazon. You can get a pack of like 10 of them for less than $10. I use them for quite literally everything, from like moving the fiber around while I am dyeing, to applying the dye, to measuring. Sometimes when I need just a teeny tiny thing, I will wet the tip and then dip it in the dry dye, and then I can count how many times I do that. And that is a actually fairly accurate way for me to replicate recipes. So I'll tell write down 5 dips, and then I know that I dipped into the dye X number of times. And when you have to measure in like tiny amounts, that makes a huge difference. So I am going to attempt to see if I can figure out how to have this be held while I do this. So 1 second. Okay, so I think this is actually going to work. So what I do when I am trying to get really vibrant fiber is I make sure, if you look at my water table, this is a 2.5 inch pan, and the water table is just like basically barely above the fiber. Like, you want it a good amount in there, because the real big thing is that you're going to need to use this chopstick to really poke the color down into the yarn. So I wet my chopstick and I grab a little bit of the dye and I start applying it. Now, this is where I tell people, you do not have to be freaking out about having your fiber felt. It is not going to felt if you are just working it normally. I mean, if you're like stabbing it repeatedly, yeah, it's going to felt eventually. But as long as you're not doing like a really aggressive temperature change, and you're just treating it, gently, but you could still, move it around and do what you need to do with it. So like, as you can see, I'm like picking it up a little bit with the chopstick and just making sure that I'm getting it like under each section. You will still have to like flip your fiber at the end after everything is exhausted, just to make sure there weren't any like spots that hid on you. But for the most part, this method works really, really well. Like, I have never had a single solitary issue getting really vibrant color, even on like Corriedale or something that, doesn't take the dye quite as brilliantly. I have a hard time actually telling which fiber is superwash versus non-superwash, because I can get it like basically as vibrant. So I figured I would do just kind of a couple of colors so you can kind of see what I do. And we just start working it into the fiber. Yes, this is definitely going to use a good amount of dye. That said, I still have jars of dye that I got when I first started doing this 5 years ago. So, I mean, you're not going to go through it like ridiculously fast, but like I think I've had this jar of teal for at least 6 months and I use it all the time. So it's not gonna, you're not gonna go through like an entire jar of dye, even though it looks like I'm putting quite a bit on. So again, lift it up some, just kind of watch your water, especially if you're working with colors that you don't want to mix. I don't really mind if there's some small amount of mixing, because I'll get some purples and stuff where it's mixing with the berry color, and that's fine. Like, I don't mind that. But if it's colors that you don't want to mix, you're gonna want to be a little bit more careful to just make sure that you go slower. But again, you can see I'm being, you know, reasonably aggressive with, you know, poking the fiber. I'm not like being super careful with it, but I'm not worried that it's gonna felt either. So, all right, and last color for this colorway. So yeah, like you can definitely get vibrant colors with non-superwash. Like, I have never had an issue with it. But I'm also not scared to use like a lot of dye. I'm not scared to poke the fiber and really work it into the fiber. And you just gotta be okay with like experimenting. I happen to know that this color will exhaust even with a ridiculous amount of dye. So when I am trying to get a really intense color here, I'm gonna use a good amount of the dye. Again, we're gonna kind of work it into the fiber, just making sure that moving it around some. And then I'm gonna let this sit and exhaust, and when I am ready, I'm gonna kind of flip everything over and just make sure that I didn't miss any spots. Like, there's a little bit of spot right here I can see that needs a smidge more of the teal. So I'll just add that there. But yeah, that's really the main trick to getting really good color saturation on fiber. So hope that helps.